welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. I am one of your co-hosts, Blake Ruffino. Alongside me is my counterpart and co-host, Joe DeLeone. Good evening, good sir. How are you?
I'm doing great. I've got a thought that's not college football related.
Okay.
No, I'm excited about the college basketball video game getting announced today. I know that I'm not very original or creative with things that get me excited, Blake, but that was a nice little pleasant bit of news this morning. I wonder if we're going to get the baseball game as well, which some people were talking about today.
Yeah, so I was the one who said, "Dear EA Sports, comma, on Twitter, we would rather the baseball game." And then so people took that as me being very literal. I was just saying that I wanted it more than basketball. Right. And then I go down the replies. A lot of people are calling me white. Like you're being too white right now. And I'm like, because I like baseball?
Well, good. Yeah, I mean, that's a good
response. I guess. But here's the thing. These are the small instances, and I understand it's a video game.
Yeah.
These are the small instances of normalization inside of our childhood, right?
Oh, yes.
In reference to, all right, the house settlement case has gone through. You got the football game back. You're bringing back basketball. Maybe baseball comes back. And it's starting to get a little bit more normal, which should get everybody a little bit more excited about how these things are happening. Now, Joe, I know you don't cover college basketball like that, but I'm just going to tell you something. You do realize that the real money that's being made in college athletics is not necessarily in football from an individual standpoint. Example, Florida had a player that got $8 million in value of NIL money with a shoe contract with Nike and with the NIL that Florida paid him coming off a national title. Mm-hmm. So the real question is that you need to be stretching out your sons and making them do growth spurts really and try to get 6'6" so they can go play basketball and make a lot of money. $8 million.
Well, they can spend a lot more money on singular players because the rosters are a lot smaller. And I think that, the revenue sharing, you kind of have to figure out ways to spend it. I think the college basketball game could be amazing. I think it's going to be really complicated to try and figure out because there's so many freaking schools. Maybe they don't put every school in it. Like, how much money are you going to be able to pay to these? Actually, I guess it's the same amount of athletes. It's really less athletes in grand total.
Yeah, I mean, it's about the same number of athletes that you would have in football. You just have more teams. The more complicated thing for me would be the stadiums or arenas that you got to. I mean, let's say you put 130 teams in there. You got to do 130 arenas. That would be the more difficult thing that I think would happen.
There's more than 130 because there's no FCS for college basketball. There's
you're right. That 308. It's the same as baseball. 308.
Yeah,
it's a lot.
It's a great point. That
maybe it's why. By the way, until 2028 to come out with a game.
Yes, that was about to say that. That's this kind of bittersweet part about this is that we're 3 years away from that coming out. It's just nice little news. We can just kind of close our eyes and then open them in 3 years when the game comes out.
They said that it would be 2027 if you remember when the college football video game would come out. By the way,
did they? No,
yes,
I thought that they always said.
Yeah. No, remember they said it was like a 5-year window.
Okay, maybe they didn't want to get our hopes up. Maybe that's what it was.
And they kept reducing the time. Oh, I hear it's coming. Remember, if you remember, David Waters, our good friend David Waters over at Gators Breakdown, remember, they were so mad at him. They said, we're not releasing the game that day. And then newsflash, they released the game that day. He did that a year before anybody, like he knew the date. Remember, it was all this kind of craziness. I think it'll come out sooner than 2028. As soon as Twitter and everybody starts talking and they get the investing behind it, I think 2027 will be the year that we get.
Well, not to drag this topic too much because I know we got football to get to, but the only thing I would say I agree with that I slightly push back though. EA doesn't have a basketball model to build off of.
Yeah,
they'd have to start from scratch. That's the only key difference here is that they'd have to completely start from scratch with everything.
Very, very true. And look, we'll see how that goes, but I am glad it's back. You know who else is really heating up, and I am using a basketball pun in this. We got 4 teams, Joe, that tonight we'll talk about in recruiting. They're starting to heat up. Notre Dame, Michigan, Bama, and Texas A&M all heating up. We'll talk about them as well. We'll do an LSU deep dive. We have been pushing the LSU deep dive back mainly due to the fact you keep asking at least once a month, and I keep saying they're in baseball season. Don't get the Bayou mad. But tonight we're going to do an LSU deep dive. So we'll get to that as well. But probably the biggest news, quote unquote, that we have here tonight outside of Jake Ratzlaff and the BYU situation is it's official. Texas State is heading to the Pac-12. Joe, and they spent the money in the buyout to their current conference in cash, and now they're heading to the Pac-12. Realignment continues. Your thoughts on Texas State heading to the Pac-12?
This statement, to be very clear here, it's not me saying that Texas State is going to rise to becoming a blue blood powerhouse. I'm not saying that at all. It's not what I'm about to get at. But I really do think that Texas State is one of the few outliers at the group of five level. If given the opportunity to shine and to flourish, would capitalize on it. I think that they can rise in this new version of the group of six, which is what the Pac-12 is, a group of six conference. It could be the best group of six conference. They can be one of the top four teams consistently.
Oh, shit, it is group of six now.
Yeah, we got to remember to say that. They can be one of the top four teams in the Pac-12 every single year. They have the infrastructure. They have the intent, the focus, the competitiveness, all of those things that we're seeing that they need to put forward in order to produce a successful program. At the FCS level, they were risers. They wanted to move up. And I think the biggest part about this, Blake, and I mentioned this before, G.J. Kinney is one of the fastest risers in the coaching ranks, young coach who is amazing and incarnate word. They paid him to stay a lot of money. He's, I believe, the highest paid, if not one of the highest paid G6 coaches at this current moment. They want him to stick around because they see the long-term vision. He probably could have jumped ship and gone to a low-level P4, but sticking at Texas State where the resources are going to him, they could do more damage than some of these mediocre, unmotivated Power 4 teams.
Well, I'm glad there's two things. Number one, to get to your point right there, I'm glad they stayed with him after last season. His roster got completely purged after they had success. Mm-hmm. He came out and said, listen, and you can go back and listen to the interview. If you want us to have success, you're going to have to spend money in NIL, and you're going to have to spend money. There's nothing that I can do here. If you want to put all the blame on me, that's fine. But the problem is that my roster is getting purged, and there's nothing I can do about it. Joe, in 2008, I came into the Southland Conference, and guess who was in our conference? Texas State. By the way, 0-2 was Texas State versus the Southeastern Lions when your boy was in school, just throwing that out there. They have grown quickly, very, very quickly. Joe, we're talking about in less than 20 years. Now they're in the Pac-12. If you would have told me 20 years ago when I started college that Texas State, who got blown out by Southeastern in a noon kickoff game for the Southeastern Lions, that in 20 years they'd be in the Pac-12, I would have laughed in your face. The thing, though, about this is that now they're there, and there's a lot of different contexts. It's not the traditional Pac-12. It's a different Pac-12. I'm glad that they're not scared to make the move. I'm glad that there's a school out there with a backing from a president that went out there and said, how much money you need? And, Joe, they again, I don't know if you read the On3 article, in cash. Like they did not blink an eye. This is what they are spending money. Not only that, Joe, in the face of G6 football with TV revenue money. So remember when we were in school, that FCS money or the TV revenue money, that you would get paid $1 million and $500,000 would go to the administration and would go to all this different stuff. Guess what? Can't do that now. Mm-hmm. So now you do have a situation, and we have not talked about this much. Now the lower G6 and FCS opponents that get paid that money, guess where it's got to go now? Congratulations to the players. So I look at this and say they're making a massive amount of investment here in a program that's climbed into where they are now, into a situation now where it could benefit them greatly. Texas is a hard state to recruit. It's a very, very, very hard state to recruit. They got to continue to spend money. You can't go to a conference like that with some programs that will be in that conference. Joe, I say they're going up against the big leagues. They're not really, but it is an advancement from an athletic standpoint from where they want to go. By the way, you got to think more than just the football avenue in this. Oregon State just made it to Omaha.
Yeah.
Like some of these, like other sports have been dominant. Oregon State, if I'm not mistaken, also made it into, we were just talking about basketball, made it into the tournament. There are so many. Did they not? I think they were an 8 seed.
I think they did. I think you're right.
I'm pretty sure that they were an 8 seed. Regardless, they were 2 years ago, I believe. Maybe I'm wrong. Yeah, I think Oregon State.
I'll look it up. Continue.
Okay. Regardless of that, it is a step up in athletics for them on a week in, week out basis. The bottom line for me is this. You're going up in a situation where this can't be the end-all, be-all where you're spending money. I know you're going to get some TV revenue here. You're going to get some money. You got to continue to spend it. Good for Texas State for being able to do that. But, Joe, I said this when we talked about the Pac-12 2 weeks ago. I'm going to say it again. I think people need to pump their brakes a little bit here, though. Like, pump your brakes a little because they're trying to revamp some things. Now, if they go get Stanford, they go get Cal, they go get somebody else with a bigger brand than Texas State, then I will say, okay, well, what's going on here? Until then, let's see what happens. I understand the Stanford and Cal's not necessarily massive brands, but Joe, you got to get some bigger brands in there to make this whole thing worthwhile. And I would do it if I'm Stanford, by the way.
Yeah, well, yeah, it makes there's nothing to gain from staying in the ACC. Same thing with Cal, and they can be competitive in the new look Pac-12 more than they were in the past couple of years.
No doubt.
I don't think a lot of people naturally think, at least I hope not, that are fans of these programs think that suddenly this thrusts them into power conference territory. I don't think they're ever actually going to get back to power conference territory, but they can absolutely be the best G6 conference. They have committed brands at the current moment, also outside of football. They added Gonzaga, who is going to be part of this, who is a basketball powerhouse. By the way, Oregon State did not make the tournament. They made the College Basketball Crown, which is that new tournament that's being played in Vegas. But I think that if they go on this trajectory, they can 100% accomplish that. And I think the biggest separation point is what we talked about when the CBS broadcasting deal was announced, that they can revitalize After Dark, Pac-12 After Dark. That is where you build the brand, that you are the premier thing that people are watching when Oregon and Washington are playing in earlier time slots now. That is what's available and on. And I think viewership can be great. It's not going to blow everybody's socks off, but I think you can get a couple barn burners and a couple entertaining games that people were happy to watch that were available late at night.
Let me throw out a scenario to you then. You said they maybe can't get back to the Power Four, okay, and you might be right there. Here's the thing, though. They don't need to be. Could you imagine Texas State versus Boise State, and whoever wins is still in contention for the playoff?
Yeah, exactly my point. They both put
right. I mean, Boise State was a playoff team a year ago. I fully agree. Could you and listen, Joe? There's only so many games that you and I can watch on a given moment. Now we had to go back a lot and last year and watch Boise State. Okay, and then we text each other during the first half and be like, I'm so tired of watching Ashton Genty get 72 carries in the first half and just kill these kids. But the bottom line is that if they did do that, it makes it very intriguing. Because listen, I don't know about you, but for me, I'm not in bed until like 2 a.m. on a Saturday during the fall.
Yeah.
I mean, it's non-existent. So yes, do it, get after it. Glad that they're expanding. I would get more excited if you added a Cal or Stanford for me.
I'm curious if they're going to try and go that route. I don't know what the requirements and the details that would take, but I do believe that that needs to be at least approached and considered.
Spend, excuse me. Think how much money you can save just staying on the West Coast. I mean, the problem would be is if you did win the conference, I guess you get an auto bid if that's where we're going to go here, I guess.
But they're never going to win the ACC. You would have a better chance of going undefeated or going 11-1 in the Pac-12, having the backing of national brands of Cal and Stanford. You'd have a better chance of doing that and going to the playoff than you would winning the ACC.
No, I agree.
It's not like any of these West Coast Big Ten teams where you're at least for the most part, not every away game traveling to the opposite coast. Some of them you're traveling to the Midwest, which is still hard as shit. But to travel to all the way to the South, most of these teams are in the southern part of the East Coast. That is far as hell for Northern California to have to travel. They need to.
I would wonder what Stanford and Cal's agreement with the ACC is. Can they get out of that? I don't know.
I bet it's not like super binding. I mean, their current grant of rights is pretty tied down to the ESPN broadcasting deal that didn't include them. So,
right. Well, I mean, what are you giving up? I mean,
yeah.
It's a very interesting conversation. But good on Texas State. Glad they're going to be there, and good on them. I mean, again, 20 years ago, Joe, they were in Strawberry Stadium in Hammond, Louisiana, getting their asses whooped, and now look at them.
By the way, I was looking at LSU's schedule. Are you going to go to the Southeastern Louisiana game? That's lame.
I mean, the reason I went to Omaha this year was, number one, when they got against Coastal Carolina, I was pretty confident that they were winning. But number two, we make so much money in those post games, man. I mean,
it's true. Yeah, but even against Southeastern Louisiana,
I will not be there. I will not be there.
All right.
You can ask my wife, dude. Again, we went to the baseball game with Southeastern Louisiana and LSU, and got out the car, and I'm getting screamed at. Literally,
that's a fair point.
I'm just like, no, I don't like being screamed at with my children with me. Please stop screaming.
Why were they screaming at you?
Hey, YS, what's up? And I'm like,
never mind, it's fair.
Jesus, just relax. Hey, man. People touching, calling my son's name, like, what's up, Ben? I'm like, hey, man, you don't really know us like that.
That is a little weird.
That is a little weird. But I'm glad it happens. It happens. All right. Let's get moving here. Joe, let's talk about our good friends over at betonline.ag. When we come back, we're going to break down 4 teams and how they've been dominating in the month of June, in the last day of June. We'll talk about those 4 teams. But before we do that, everybody hit the like and share to all those groups if you're on Facebook and to all those social media pages. You're watching us, listen to us on YouTube. Like, subscribe, notification bell, wherever you listen. This free agency with the NBA.
I could care less. I could care less. So it's too dramatic.
I mean, but did you see the Steelers fans today for an hour when they thought they got Jalen Ramsey and then they realized they gave up Fitzpatrick?
That was pretty funny.
They were celebrating. Oh, Super Bowl, here we go. Oh, no, we gave up Minka Fitzpatrick.
Yeah.
What a dumb trade.
Worst trade of the offseason. Panicked. They completely panicked.
But good on the Dolphins. All right. Joe, you know who's been getting some really good players here in recruiting?
Who's that?
Well, there's 4 teams. I'm glad you brought that up. Michigan, Notre Dame, Bama, and Texas A&M all have been dominating in the month of June when it comes to recruiting, the hot time for when it comes to commits. And really and truthfully, I see everybody always saying in recruiting, oh, these kids, sometimes they don't stick. About 90% of the time they do stick. But, Joe, I got to start off with the University of Michigan here and how much they've been dominating over the month of June. They have been absolutely dominant, especially along the defensive line, getting guys like Carter Meadows, getting guys like Titan Davis, getting Alistair Vallejo, who we talked about off air, getting Blade, the other defensive lineman. And, Joe, by the way, they are in contention to get Julian Walker, the edge rusher, as well. Michigan really dominating here down the stretch in the month of June.
Yeah, I'm blown away by this, Blake. This is – I remember back to where they were this time-ish last year.
Really bad.
Thrown more, coming into his first year, and we were kind of talking about in spurts whenever we brought it up, what is Sherrone Moore doing? And part of the things that we talked about, it was just really a complicated turnover with everything that was happening coming off the national championship. Didn't feel like a national championship winning program, how they should have been recruiting coming off of that. This is light years ahead of where they were last year. And this is how they need to build a standard for success as a program. And I think that the biggest part about this, why they were so great under Jim Harbaugh, they had such an intent on both lines of scrimmage, going after 4-star, 5-star offensive and defensive linemen. Carter Meadows is huge. It was a huge name that they were able to pull with this. But I'm really a big fan of them getting Alistair Vallejo, who I broke down his tape. We did a breakdown of him on A to Z Sports Film Room because he reminded Ryan and I of Mason Graham. He is like a clone of Mason Graham, who was not a highly recruited kid, just like Alistair Vallejo. Number 10 in the On3 industry rankings at this current moment, Blake. This is the type of things that a national championship winning program needs to do. I just wonder, can they take another step forward and then possibly finish within the top 10 instead of right at number 10?
Yeah, I mean, listen, when you bring in what will be, if Julian Walker does commit to them, you bring in 5 defensive linemen, Joe, they just clean up. And here's the thing. They've been developing at such a high level, which means for me one thing. You know, on NCAA, it's not NCAA, college football 25, when you find the diamonds in the rough, and you're like, oh, this guy's a 3-star, but he's a diamond. He's got better traits than any 5-star that I have on my board. They have done under Harbaugh, and maybe they will do this under Sherrone Moore too, that they have identified and scouted better than anybody in some areas, especially up front. Joe, what has happened in the last 2 years? Let's recap for just a moment what they've done on the field. What they've done is you saw them go up against Ohio State. You saw them go up against Alabama. You saw them go up against Indiana. Now, they went 2-1 in those games. But even in those games, Joe, there were times defensively where they freaking dominated. Now they're doing that again in recruiting. Recruiting both lines of scrimmage is the lifeblood that fuels the dreams of champions. Who's your national champion a year ago? Ohio State. Well, what did that look like? All right, let's go the year before. Well, really the last 2 years before that, Georgia. How did that look? LSU, Bama. How did that look? Joe, they all were dominant and had dominant dudes on the line of scrimmage. That is how you win games in college football. 5 defensive linemen. Now, maybe not all of them stay, but you go out and you get multiple interior defensive linemen. You go out and get a pair of edge rushers. And, Joe, quite honestly, that's just how you're going to win. Need to do some things in their DB room. Need to do some things. In my humble opinion, I know that they got Zion Robinson. He can't be the only dude at receiver that you go and get. But, man, it's a big deal when you're recruiting at such a high level, and what it feels to me that you're scouting at such a high level and then developing.
One thing that I think would like really be a crown jewel for this class is if
Premier
they're able to
tackle.
Well, no, I was going to go with Savion Hyder, who's the number 1 running back in this class. Another guy that we just broke down on the A to Z Film Room channel. And he separates himself completely from all the running backs. They're in the mix for Hyder, and I think that they're going pretty aggressively at him. I know Ohio State and Georgia also really want this Hyder kid. That dude is so strong, and he is so fluid. If they're able to get him, it would continue this lineage of just premier Michigan running backs that we've seen over the past few years. And we know running the football is so important for them. I think that Hyder is like the big name that I'm tracking for where does he land, especially if they were able to pull him away from Ohio State.
I do think that when you have a quarterback like Bryce Underwood, you need to go get a dude on either at tackle, or you need to bring in a premier receiver. I don't know if you can bring in a premier receiver. Joe, where are these premier receivers going? Those guys that get paid a lot, and all of them have what? They have guys at that position that are in the NFL currently producing. Bottom line. Offensive line is a little bit different. You go inside and you go in home and in-home visit with somebody and one of these dudes, and you go in there and say, hey, we're running the ball 45 times a game. Joe, that's the offensive lineman's dream. I think that they've built off of the momentum that they ended the season with. And listen, with all the chaos, even when we talked about on Sunday with yesterday, with the whole Harbaugh situation and getting named in a class action suit, Joe, they got a lot of momentum, though, when we just separate all the off-field bullshit with the on-field and on-field shit, right? Like I think we have to be able to separate those two things to be able to get where and see where they're going. We'll see. I really like what I'm seeing from the University of Michigan.
Yeah, all positive signs. This is a truly tremendous class. But I think that the final thought there is, yeah, they need to start building up an arsenal of receivers because even under Harbaugh in the last couple of years, didn't do a great job of getting big-name guys, so much to the point where, like, Roman Wilson was his best receiver his last year there during the national championship run that they had. Relied a lot on tight end production, running the football. J.J. McCarthy played well, but I think one of the things that held him back is not having a lot of options to turn to. So they could use a little bit more explosiveness at receiver. And I think to that point, if they add somebody, that would be the real way to take this class over the top.
Just to add on that, remember J.J. McCarthy in the first training camp with Justin Jefferson, what he said? He goes, I'm literally just chunking it downfield, and I know that he's going to come and catch it. You didn't have that. Can you grab that for Bryce Underwood and help him? Joe, I don't think listen, we've listened to a lot of quarterbacks. I've been fortunate to be around in my career 2 Heisman Trophy winning quarterbacks. Literally the last time that I saw one, I was like, hey, what is the connection to Jaden Daniels, by the way? What is the connection between you and Malik like? He goes, brother, you do realize sometimes I just throwing that thing out there. Like, because I know he's going to come down with it. Yeah. And I think that, and he's being dead. Everybody around me's laughing besides me. And I'm like, hold on. Y'all are laughing because y'all think he's joking. The truth of the matter is he ain't joking. Like, he's not joking. So you do that, and I start thinking that, man, all right, you better keep your eyes on the University of Michigan. Joe, another team in the Midwest, number 3 on the current On3 rankings, the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Joe, your thoughts of what the Notre Dame Fighting Irish has been able to do down the stretch here and some really good things that they've been able to do in recruiting.
They started this cycle pretty hot. They were doing a great job in the spring of going and getting up guys like Rodney Dunham, who eventually was recognized as a 5-star by pretty much every outlet after they updated a lot of the rankings. He is the exceptional piece that they have in here, but they were on a heater last week. They were the real antithesis of us doing this segment. We even had some Notre Dame listeners that were commenting and asking, like, are you guys going to talk about this? We had to. Ian Premer, the tight end, the number 4 tight end, was one of the highest rated ranked tight ends that they've ever gotten in a tight end recruit.
Oh, no, Notre Dame got a tight end.
But that's crazy. It's crazy for me to say that with the history of tight end recruits that have gone to Notre Dame. It's one of the highest rated kids since Michael Mayer came in there, and he was huge for the program. Kari Adams, the number 6 corner on 3, is super significant. But this all comes to me with them getting Joey O'Brien, who was a fast rising name over the past 3-4 months in the recruiting industry. He has been picking up steam. He is a tall, long defensive back who looks a lot like Kyle Hamilton. It might be even faster than Kyle Hamilton. 6'3", 6'4", can cover for days. And he might even be able to play receiver. He might end up playing on the offensive side of the football. He is that athletic to play both sides. He just dominated during the OT7. He won the award for the best player out there, I believe. This kid is a true blue chipper that Notre Dame needs on the defensive side of the ball. And I think that if you keep him committed, which it's a kind of uncertain, he might be a kid who changes his mind down the road, but if you keep him committed and he signs and he shows up, that is the type of a prospect that continues to build this defensive dominance that they've had over the past few years under Marcus Freeman.
Well, I think the biggest thing for Joey O'Brien is not the fact that you get a 5-star here, a top 30 guy in the class. What I think it's the biggest thing is Joe, the week before he committed, the week before he visited Notre Dame, because he visited Notre Dame on June the 13th, was the week 7 days before that, he went to Oregon. The week before that, he went to Clemson. I can keep doing this. So I do think two things with Joey O'Brien here. Number one, it comes up to a fact in reference to that you're getting, like, he visited you last. I always think that that's a big deal on where a kid's telling you he wants to go. Joe, inside the state of Pennsylvania is Joey O'Brien. The week before Clemson, he was at Penn State. So you look at where these kids, by their actions, what they're telling you. And you got to give Marcus Freeman one thing. Joe, they're recruiting at a pretty damn high level in the DB room at both levels, at safety and at corner. Now, don't take what I'm about to say the wrong way, because I do not mean this in a wrong way. There have been times where I've seen dominating teams. LSU 2011 comes to mind for me, where you went out there and you absolutely dominated that area. Remember Tyrann Mathieu, Patrick Peterson, Mo Claiborne, those level of dudes. Joe, it was a no-fly zone. Brandon Taylor was a guy that I played high school with who was a part of that. Joe, they were doing exactly what Notre Dame is doing at the current moment. And maybe that 2011 team that I was talking about was one of the better secondaries that we saw. You know who else did that? Bama. Now, the thing that separated Bama versus everybody else was that they did that in the defensive line and linebacker too. You cannot ignore what Notre Dame's doing in the secondary. It's unignorable what they're doing and what they've been recruiting there. As an entire class, there are a couple more pieces I think they need to add here. They are in contention for the number 1 overall class. And people will snicker and laugh at that, but it is the truth. Got to add some more pieces. But in the secondary, Joe, it's undeniable. But then they went back. This is how I feel looking at them. From the month of June on, they went and got 2 guys that are premier athletes, premier dudes. Then they went full Notre Dame. You ready? They went quarterback, tight end, and 2 offensive linemen. It's the most Notre Dame thing ever. But you have the infrastructure hey, let's be us, but we're going to go out and we're going to go into Pennsylvania and win on a kid that's a 5-star kid for him to come in here and do what we do. It's a separation from what really your fan base was clamoring about. We need these high-level dudes. Joe, it's an impressive level of recruiting. You're dominating on the offensive line. You go and get a tight end, a quarterback, and then you're dominating in the secondary. It's a really good overall look for Michigan, for Notre Dame. We just got done talking about yes.
I do agree. Like, that to me is like you're getting all these guys that are top 10 at your position, which Notre Dame's done in the past, but like now you're starting to.
Joe, it's the number 1 safety in the country, damn
yeah.
near.
Well, he's number. There's a really good safety class.
I think he's number 3, but I mean he's right for Blaine Bradford and all those kids.
There's 4 5-star safeties in this class. It's like one of the rarest safety classes that you'll ever see. But in a normal year, he's the number 1 safety. I think that the last part with this, 2 guys that committed a little bit ago that can be brought up in this conversation as well, that fits the Notre Dame identity. They got 2 running backs, 2 of the highest rated running backs in this class, number 8 and number 10 in this class, Jonas Walton and Javian Osborne. Their play styles are not identical, but very similar to the pairing that we have right now with Jadarian Price and Jeremiah Love. They know what they need to do to breed success. It's grabbing 2 guys to play off of one another. One's speed, one's a little bit more bruiser between the tackles, and then you're building through your offensive line and getting big name tight ends. So that's the whole piece with this is if you finish on signing day with all these guys sticking to ND, which it's been a lot easier, as you mentioned at the beginning of the segment, it's been a lot easier to keep guys committed because there's a lot more incentives to keep guys committed than in the past. You will have a top 3 class. You could end up having the number 1 class depending on what else happens.
Got to hold on. Listen.
Yeah, I won't give you shit for that. I mean, that's true. That applies to any recruiting class. You gotta hold on because Notre Dame. I watched them lose guys like Keon Keeley and stuff, Peyton Bowen last second, where I thought that they had him, and then last second changed their mind. So I don't disagree with that.
You gotta hold on. We don't play the game of that. You're not gonna hold on. The reason I brought that up is that when we do these, people will come in June and say, oh, see, no, they didn't hold on. You can't trust these kids. It happens every year that we've been doing this show.
Right.
Regardless of that, we're reacting to the now. And if we're reacting to the now, They are the number 3 class in the country. You did bring up something about Notre Dame just to finish this very quickly. Rodney Durham, Joe, is another separator. So defensively, again, they've done some dominating things. You talk about the defensive line. That's why I brought up earlier, hey, you want to know how Saban separated? He got an elite defensive lineman, and his secondary was elite. That is the bottom line. When you talk about those elite defenses, they've got a premier defensive lineman, and then their secondary was always really good. So if they hold on, could be really special here. All right. Joe, speaking of Alabama, Kalen DeBoer coming into Alabama, absolutely dominating over the last couple of weeks here in the month of June. When you look at Bama, I think everybody is kind of surprised, but then kind of not surprised all in the same time that Alabama is recruiting like this. I think they are surprised that Kalen DeBoer has been able to do it, but Alabama dominating the recruiting in the month of June. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I thought that Kalen DeBoer couldn't recruit in the South. That was all I heard. I love saying this every time he has a really good recruiting class. Xavier Griffin committing to Alabama was the thing that got me the most excited. And that was kind of like what the inkling of a belief was when his commitment date was coming up, was like, he's probably going to end up at Alabama. I love this because without Nick Saban, you're still getting a Nick Saban-like linebacker. His comparison by most sites, and the one that I completely agree with, he reminds me a ton of Jahad Campbell, who just went in the first round. And the reason why they're similar is Jahad Campbell was an edge rushing recruit who they moved to off-ball linebacker. And Xavier Griffin does a lot of similar things where he is a great rusher, a great blitzer, and he's going to move off ball, and they're just going to use him as a weapon. I think that them having Jordan Edmonds, the number 2 corner in this class, is, again, another Nick Saban thing. And then a Xavier Crowell is also just another great add for them, having one of the top running backs in this class. Defensively is where they're building their identity, and I think that the momentum of that defensive approach is what Kalen DeBoer needs in order for this team to get right, because at times last year, that defense was truly a liability. I don't think that that's going to be the case if he continues to recruit like this.
Well, you're speaking about defense. They're still after a linebacker in Braden Rouse from Marietta, Georgia. Can they get another linebacker there in that scenario? Joe, they're still after one of the top kids or the top kid, depending on the service that you look at, and Cedarian Morgan, the wide receiver, the 5-star, 6'4", 210-pound wide receiver. So they're not done. They're not close to being done. If they're able to lock down some of these recruits that they're desperately after in the state of Alabama that are not committed at the current moment, Anthony Jones, Cedarian Morgan, what does Landon Ducksworth do? Did he go to South Carolina? Do you get involved in that late, even though you have a quarterback? The Cleveland kid that committed to Texas, are you going to be able to flip him at the last moment? There's still a lot of things that they can do inside of the state of Alabama. What's even funnier about this is, remember last year or 2 years ago, Auburn was the team that dominated the state of Alabama when it came to recruiting. Boy, how that quickly changed in their second real full year of Kalen DeBoer recruiting in that state. They still have a lot of big-time things that they can do here. And I do think that they're starting to get rolling. Again, got to hold on. We're going to say this about every single team. But, Joe, I mean, you got to give it to them, man. They have come in there as a staff. They have done what they needed to do. When you're talking about Alabama, they went and got Max Sutter. They went and got Crowley. They went and got Finch. They went and got Kelly. Guys that they think that are going to be able to play at a high level at Alabama. So when you're looking at them, it's not a Saban class yet. Let's see if they can continue to have success here. But I think a lot of people didn't think that this was possible with Kalen DeBoer, and here we are, to your point.
Right, like that's I know we got one more team that we want to get to, not to labor too long on Alabama. I think that that's the biggest part with me, why I get excited for Alabama's fan base, is that nationally and also with your rivals, the crap talking that was happening when Kalen DeBoer was hired was that he's not going to be able to recruit the South, which a lot of these premier guys are from the surrounding states, and that he wasn't going to put a commitment towards recruiting defensively. And the best players that he's had in last year's class, which was one of the best in the 2025 cycle, in this class so far, is that he's getting premier players at each defensive position. That was what made Nick Saban great. That was what made Nick Saban teams as great as they were. he will get the offense right. He and the whole offensive staff will get things right. But if they bring in the bodies on defense, that is the way that they get in the right direction.
I completely agree there. All right, let's end up here with the recruiting as Joe, Texas A&M has moved into the top 5 when it comes to recruiting after getting Arrington and after getting Gibbons, the 2 talented 5-stars in this class, one being a DB and maybe the other being an edge, and Tristan Gibbons. Joe, well, they did also get KJ Edwards, which was a big deal too.
Yep.
Your thoughts on Mike Elko and company in year 2 going into Elko in this recruiting class as A&M moves into the top 5?
Tristan Gibbons is obviously like a huge name. It's a big get for them. We know that Elko is going to do a great job of recruiting defensive linemen, considering the development that he had at Duke and the performance that he had from his guys this past year in his first year. The one that I'm the most excited about, and the big reason why we ended up doing this segment, was to talk about Brandon Arrington. Brandon Arrington is one of the most unbelievable athletes in this class. He is so fast that he is, I believe, broken a number of records set by Noah Lyles, the Olympian. Brandon Arrington is going to be stupidly fast on this team. And I don't know if he's going to play corner or if he's going to play receiver truly. It seems like he's going to be playing corner. That level of athlete is what Texas A&M needs to continue to take steps forward. Their recruiting class last year was nice. It looked good. It was a little bit more quiet than what they had again when Jimbo Fisher was there. And that was kind of what we applauded for them, is that they were just getting the right players in to raise the floor of the team so that they didn't fall off of a cliff. I think that now we get this chance to go from well-roundedness to being more aggressive like they were in the past.
Joe, I got to be real with you. This feels like the most Mike Elko class that you can get. Edge, corner, running back, corner, edge, running back, defensive lineman, interior offensive lineman, wide receiver. Joe, it's all up front and defense. I mean, it is literally and truly, they are being structured as to what you would think a tough-nosed guy and head coach in Mike Elko would want to recruit like. I mean, I just ran off the top 9 to you. In order of ranking of position. D-line, defensive back, offensive line, and then we're just going to throw a receiver in there. Okay, we need somebody to go catch the ball, I guess. Joe, they want to play very tough-nosed defense, and they want to run the football. What else did you think Mike Elko was going to come in here and do? Not you know what I mean? Yeah. What did we think that the class that Mike Elko could put together, what it would look like? Joe, again, when you dominate up front and you recruit and develop up front and you can run the football, the world is your oyster. And I will tell you, I don't think Mike Elko would recruit kids that are soft either. Like at all. Like the Tristan Gibbons, did you see the Tristan Gibbons 360 dunk, by the way?
I didn't see that.
Oh, my God. Oh, my God. Like, just absolutely insane. You're talking about a kid, 6'3", 6'4", 220 pounds, who literally can jump out the gym. So when you're talking about these high-level guys and where you're getting them, Mike Elko doesn't want an edge rusher. He's going to go try to get the most athletic edge rusher that he can get. Sound familiar? Wait, Mike Elko had a defensive end at Notre Dame that was really athletic too. Do you remember?
Who are you talking about?
Come on. Who's your best defensive lineman in the NFL right now?
Defensive end? Who are you talking about? I don't know.
Lineman. Very athletic dude.
Why am I'm drawing a blank here.
Okay, now you're making me blank. I thought you would answer.
I don't know where you're
lineman.
I don't know why I'm drawing a complete blank who that would be.
It was the guy 4 years ago. He went to the Saints. What's his name?
Oh, Foskey. Isaiah Foskey.
Isaiah Foskey.
There we go. That was who you were getting at.
I knew it was the Saints player.
I thought that was who you were going for. I didn't know if that was who you were going
6'3",
for.
6'4", 220 pounds, that athletically was a freak.
That he wants those types of guys, and those are the guys that he's going to be able to coach.
I think he thought he was getting that in Scorton too, and I don't think
didn't didn't totally pan out.
Yeah, he got that barbecue in Texas, and he was like, I can't stop gaining weight. Yeah, he got way too big. Regardless of that, is how I would feel that Mike Elko would recruit a class.
Yeah, number 4 class right now on 3. And for the amount of commits that they have, especially in the state of Texas, surrounding area of Texas, there is no reason to believe that Texas A&M can't take full advantage of this in the next couple of years to turn this. Like, this is what you do to win a national championship. It wasn't that crazy that recruiting class that they had that completely fell apart. That was an unmitigated disaster. This is the type of recruiting that you can do and that you need to do if you actually want to compete for a title.
I'm going to stop you on one thing. Before we talk about A&M and national titles and how you build them, let's get to 9 wins.
That's fair. I mean, these guys be 3 years into their careers before.
Right. Let's get to 9 wins. Let's make a playoff. Well, let's make a playoff.
Yeah.
I mean,
don't disagree.
You know, you can get there in the way that you're recruiting. All right. The long await is here. Joe, we've been trying to do this one for quite some time now, but the Bayou was in baseball season. I told you we couldn't do this, but tonight we finally get to it. The LSU deep dive here. When you look at LSU going into the 2025 season, Joe DeLeone says what?
This roster is incredibly talented. And I said this yesterday when we talked for our rankings or the rankings for the college football video game and why LSU should have been higher. I think that there's still question marks that need to be answered, which I'm going to get to in a second. But front to back, offense, defense, skill position, quarterback, defensive line, cornerback. This is the best roster, well-rounded roster that Brian Kelly has had at LSU, without a doubt. I know that we got excited in the hope of what they could have done in year 1 when they went to the SEC championship game, the excitement of what they did over this past season, what they could have potentially have become, and when Jaden Daniels went on to win the Heisman. But now you have a lot more talent and a lot more depth at key positions. It took a couple of years. It is not going to be an immediate hit the ground running type of a situation after what LSU was going through. I think the questions, though, that I need answered, Blake, for them to reach a national championship, for them to get to the college football playoff, which is all within striking distance, they are justifiably getting hyped up by every outlet because of the talent that they have. How good is their offensive line going to be this year after losing all the bodies that they did? Can Patrick Payton capitalize on the talent that he has in a completely new setting? Because he's going to be super important for their success. And I know you're going to have a take on that. And the last, could Joe Sloan get out of his own way? And can he actually commit to running the football? Because that, I said every single week, where it felt like they abandoned the run way too quickly with a good offensive line. I felt like there was too much on Garrett Nussmeier's shoulders as a passer that it felt like he thought he had to do everything. And it led to mistake after mistake after mistake. They need to run the ball better, and if their O-line steps up with a lot of new faces, this can be their season.
I'm going to push back on one thing. I don't think it's the most talented roster that BK's had. Let me tell you why.
Okay.
You had 4 first-round picks on that 2023 offense. 4. One kid was the rookie of the year. The other, Brian Thomas Jr., just led all rookies in receiving. By the way, Trevor Lawrence got hurt halfway through the year. Malik Neighbors was in the top 10. They freaking cut Daniel Jones midway through the year, and he still had 1,000 yards. I don't know if I can go most talented. We're talking about Jaden Daniels and that receiving core with Will Campbell, who was the top 5 pick, Mason Taylor, who was the second-round pick, to the New York Jets, Emory Jones, who got selected by Baltimore. For me, I cannot go there yet. But I do think they're this is the most complete team that Brian Kelly's had. Because defensively, what they can do. I agree. When you talk about most talented, it's very hard for me to get over the leap of Jaden Daniels. It's not hard for me to get to a completely different place of most complete. Joe, you brought up running the football and offensive line. They gave up 6 sacks in their spring game in the only half of spring football that they played. Will Campbell not being there is a problem. Here's another problem, though, that LSU fans need to perk up on. Joe, that edge rush unit might be elite. I saw a beating by Jack Pyburn, by Patrick Payton, by a former five-star who's kind of coming out of his shell, and Gabe Rutherford. Jamari Butler had double-digit tackles for loss at Nebraska and is now here, and they're moving him all over the place. Joe, I do think that was a little bit to it with the offensive line. Still couldn't run the ball the last time I saw him. They got to get better. Now, they bring in a whole new staff to some regard in reference to the way that they want to run the football. They bring it in 2 years ago. They got to go get a new defensive line coach. There's still some turnover that they're trying to fix. Joe, they got to stop turning the ball over, and they got to start running the football. Defensively, I think they can be okay. Joe, I've had a hot take. I think I have seen in spring, and I'll already put a stamp on it, I think they can be a top 30 unit defensively. And I don't think that that's much to ask. Top 30? No. That would be a massive leap from 2 years ago when they were 108. I mean, horrible. Could not stop a nosebleed with a tampon. They were horrible. The problem is I think that for that I would have that they're going to be better is mainly due to the fact DB room's completely overhauled. You got the number one safety in the portal in A.J. Halsey. You went and got the number one high school DB in DJ Pickett. Can that five-star dude be ready? You really love Mansour DeLeone, meaning you, Joe. What is Mansour DeLeone going to mean for that secondary? They have not had that level of talent since they've been here. But, Joe, there's one thing that's got to happen more than anything for LSU to find themselves in the playoff under Brian Kelly. Joe, in every SEC loss at LSU under Brian Kelly, they've given up 250 rushing yards on the ground defensively. They have got pushed around. You bring in Sadir Mitchell. You bring in Don McKinley, who is a former five-star guy. You bring in some different pieces in the interior of that defensive line. Joe, the bottom line is if Garrett Nussmeier does take that next step and he cuts those turnovers in half and makes better decisions, if the weapons that he got with Nick Anderson, if the weapons that he got with Chris Hilton being healthy and coming back, and so on and so forth, Trey'Dez Green, I'm really high on. Joe, if they're able to get stops defensively for once, they might be cooking with some grease. Because I do think ultimately Garrett is able to cut some of those turnovers down. And here's another hot take. I think offensively they will jive a little bit better to what Garrett wants to do. The bottom line remains, though, Joe, if they can't run the football and they can't stop the run, they're going to be back in the same spot that they were pretty much under Brian Kelly on the outside looking into the playoff. That's where they'll stand. They got to fix up front. They got to have a different toughness level. Now, you brought up something that might be true. BK coming into LSU in year one and him going to the SEC championship game might have been overselling what the current state of LSU currently was. They still had 36 scholarship players, and he still had to go get 40 from the portal. Joe, he had to get 40 players from the portal. Yeah. I mean, it was no structure. Then Jaden Daniels happened, and maybe the timeline got pushed up because he just went stupid. He went Cocoa for Cocoa Puffs. From a depth perspective and from a completeness perspective, I agree this could be their most complete team. But, Joe, again, LSU's got three massive question marks that nobody wants to get after. Interior of that defensive line, can Nuss cut down on the turnovers, and can you run the football? But, Joe, I got to be honest with you. I feel like that's massive question marks.
They are massive question marks, and I think why I feel there should be more optimism is that last offseason coming into the year, it was like a serious glaring issue, your defensive line, so much so that you were grabbing at scraps to get any bodies in your interior, and you failed. It was a failure of trying to rebuild that defensive line. This time around, it felt like you didn't have to be nearly as desperate. You can grab a Jack Pyburn, who's a good quality secondary college rusher, who's not going to go on to be a top 100 draft pick. He's going to be a nice quality, bust your ass, hard-nosed kid. And you can bank on the talent of Patrick Payton with the surrounding bodies and the chemistry that you have in the locker room to tap into something there. he's got a lot to prove. And I really think that like that is the catalyst for your biggest defensive success, because I know who Manthur DeLeone is as a player. Like he's been the same player for the past 2 years. He's been awesome. He's been great in coverage. I thought he was going to declare for the draft, but he decided to go back and he decided to take on this opportunity at LSU. And Harold Perkins come back healthy. Like you hope that you still get that athleticism roaming around your defense to go back there and make plays all over the field. But if Patrick Payton can be this 10-plus sack guy like we knew that he was 2 years ago, and he's locked in every single week, he is going to be super disruptive. You need that for your defense to take a step forward, because that's something that LSU hasn't had. And I think that was a big separator and a big killing point for them in a lot of their sloppy games. The thing that sucked for LSU last year, when you have as many weaknesses, underlying weaknesses that you didn't really notice and lacked as much depth as you did last year, your losses weren't just losses. Like, they were frustrating as hell bad losses. The Florida game was bad. The Alabama game was bad. I think now when you have this much more depth, and
USC,
when you've got all these young guys that are stepping up and improving, you're going to prevent those games from happening in the future.
Look, you got to win week one. The two things that I would say here that I think that are Joe, well, today's the 30th. So by August the 3rd, so Thursday, or July the 3rd, Thursday. Joe, we're a month away before we're out there at camp and we're watching LSU. Okay? So
crazy.
Think of this. That edge, I've been telling you about, like, hey, man, I went to every practice BK allowed us to be at, every one of them. Joe, all right, I'm just telling you, that edge, I've seen Patrick Payton and Jack Pyburn and Gabe Rutherford, remember the name, dog, either LSU's got an absolutely massive problem at tackle, or this edge unit, bro. They have not had that. I'm sorry, they have not. Not from a collective. Harold Perkins comes back. He'll be in that star role. We'll see what happens there. But, Joe, the receiving core, including the tight ends that Garrett can have to throw to, could be something. Joe, when Chris Hilton came back, they were a lot better. Trey'Dez Green at tight end is a freak show. He is a freak show of an athlete. They got serious speed, man. They really do. LSU, to me, if I'm looking at it unbiased, 50,000-foot view here. 50,000-foot view, if you tell me LSU's in the playoffs, I don't blink an eye, because you got high-level talent at some high-level positions. But I also have seen some worries, and I don't think LSU fans are taking into account how massive those worries can be. Like, brother, if you struggle on your offensive line with a quarterback who does not like to run, and it could be a recipe for disaster, a very big recipe of disaster. So, look, man, I want to be very optimistic. I do. More than anybody, I want to be optimistic. I'm going into this season with LSU just, hey, prove it. You did what you think you needed to do. Now you got to go and prove it. I can see anything happening here. I don't think that their floor is 8-4 again, if I'm just being honest. I think they're a 9-3, 10-2 level team. That's where I see them. They got enough talent to be 9-3. Joe, they're a win away from being it last year, but wheels fell off at the end of the year. We'll see.
I think the schedule, too, does set them up. I know that we're closing out here, but the schedule sets them up to go 10-2. There's a lot of chances for redemption, to get revenge against a lot of the big teams that you suffered awful losses.
Florida, South Carolina.
Yeah. You can really make your mark against those teams. 10-2 is doable. And there's no reason why LSU can't get to the playoff. In the expanded era, they've got one of the easier SEC schedules. Getting to the playoff should be the expectation.
I don't think it's easy at all.
I think it's easier than some of the teams that we've talked about. Like, I think Georgia's got a gauntlet. Texas has got a tough schedule. Alabama's got a gauntlet like we went through. It's on the easier side.
They got.
You don't play Georgia.
No, they don't play Georgia or Texas. But read off all the quarterbacks in order.
DJ Lagway, but you get him at home. Whoever Southeastern Louisiana's quarterback will be a tough one. Austin Simmons on the road.
Well, you missed Kate Klubnik too.
Kate Klubnik at the beginning of the season. Lenora Sellers, you get him at home. At Vanderbilt, Diego Pavia, who we're not that high on. You host Ty Simpson. You travel to deal with Taylor Green, which could be a trap. And then you host
I think Arkansas is at
Mateer.
home. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mateer.
Arkansas at home.
And Mateer.
Yeah.
Shit.
I think compared to some of the other schedules I've read, there's trap games in here. There's a lot of trap games. We're kind of banking on Florida and Ole Miss being great this year.
I would take Austin Simmons today, even with just one drive over Diego Pavia.
Oh, yeah. Easily.
I'm going to get chewed up by LSU fans. See you tomorrow or Wednesday. Y'all have a good one. Peace.